Competition is for losers was a recent article that came out in the Wall Street Journal that was authored by Peter Thiel, who is famous from being a co-founder of PayPal, from being the first angel investor in Facebook, and from being one of the leading advocates out there for dropping out of college and starting a new venture after he graduated from Stanford Law School. But that aside, what we want to look to at this premise of competition is it really for losers? Is this a new idea? Or is it a bit of a reminder of something that we've known a long time in entrepreneurship, and that it's important to be different, and that it's important to bring a differentiated product to the market? So in this context, we're going to think about value innovation and competition, and we're going to look at how these are connected and what that interplay is. So what valuable company is nobody building is one of the central starting points of the article. And it seeks to differentiate this element of thinking about creating value, bringing something that's valuable to the market, is not always the same thing as becoming a valuable company. There are many products and services out there that may add value to you, that if they were free, you would use and you would benefit from, but you've chosen not to pay for many things. You go to stores and you choose not to buy many products. Even though they could add value, they don't necessarily add value in parallel with the price they're charging for you individually. So again, there is the difference that we're thinking about here, and what the question is for entrepreneurs is how can they create value and create a valuable company at the same time. A good example of that is Google. Google is worth 3 times every US airline combined when you look at the value of the company. And it's attributed to the fact that airlines compete in somewhat of a perfect competition model of homogeneous offerings. Google, a bit of a monopoly. They somewhat stand alone in what they do. And we look at that in the context of being able to quantify this. So when we look at perfect competition, we want to think about what we learned in our basic economics courses, of that perfect competition exists when supply equals demand. And what you see is that when you do have these undifferentiated homogeneous products, you have some perfect balance. But to get to that point, there are elements of profits that induce new firm entrants as new industries are born and as new markets are created. But as those profits are there, it induces new firms to enter, which increases supply. This will then drive down prices. Some of the competition suffers because of that decline in pricing and that decline in profitability. From there, select competitors exit. Others merge. Others may be acquired, until there's some shakeout and reduction in the level of supply where it meets the level of demand, and prices and profits reach somewhat of a sustainable equal level. What we want to think about with modern monopolies is they operate on somewhat of a different playing field, and they do things differently. Google owns search at 68%. So 68% of the online searches are done via Google. The remaining 30% is split somewhat evenly between Microsoft and Yahoo, but they're a long ways behind at less than 20% each. Luxottica out of Europe is the preeminent manufacturer and retailer of eyewear, both glasses and sunglasses. Your LensCrafters, your Pearle Vision, your Target Optical, your Sears Optical, all owned by Luxottica. Your Sunglass Hut, your Ray-Bans, your Pradas, your Revos, your Bulgaris, many, many other brands, dozens of other brands, including a lot of high-end brands that you know, owned by Luxottica under the license of the brand to Luxottica. Quanta manufactures over 30% of the world's laptops. InBev owns over 20 of the leading brands of beer globally. So what we see here is they've chosen to operate a bit differently. They've done it in large part by acquisition, and they've done it by continuing to bring innovation to the market. So when we define monopoly, what we're looking at here is there a close substitute? And if you want to create truly lasting value in the market, we encourage you to think about how to be different and how to bring differentiated products to the market. Differentiated in this context is very similar to innovation and being innovative. We also want to caution you to beware that temptation of claiming to be the only one, of claiming to be in a field or in a market for which there are zero competitors. There are always competitors, And even if it's the choice to do nothing, that might be the choice that the customer chooses. Or the customer may serve themselves. They may essentially self-satisfy whatever that need or want is. Also, be careful about defining your market too narrowly. Sometimes entrepreneurs fall victim to this as they want to find a niche. And we certainly support finding a niche to start your business, to build that expertise and to focus that marketing dollar on a very specific target customer. But if you define it too narrowly, it may just not be profitable. There may not be enough people in that market that want to spend what you need them to spend for you to build a sustainable business out of that. So we want to recognize that we can invent new and better things, that this element of creative monopolist is a term that Thiel uses, and the orientation of it is that we want to be the ones that can add new categories and that can create new market spaces. The reason that patents are issued by governments is to provide some incentive, to provide some limited monopoly of pending the country 15 to 20 years to be able to bring a product to market and to make the choice of spending significant time and research and development dollars worth it, that you can recoup and profit from those. Now, at the same time, governments will prosecute antitrust if they believe that to be in some way misused or stifling competition for the negative impact in the market, but it's a fine line. We also want to recognize there are many monopolies that have risen. IBM in the 60s and 70s, Microsoft thereafter, arguably the Apple of today. But what we see is that they've been able to create these monopolies, and they've been able to do it because they were different and they were substantial, and they were able to grow and invest their profits and invest substantial profits into building sustainable companies for decades. So in summary, what we want to think about is that all happy families may be alike and all unhappy families may be unhappy in their own way. Business is somewhat the opposite. Many new ventures fail because they try to compete and they try and do things that just aren't that different from what's out there. But it's in many of the happy companies, it's in many of the successful companies that they've been able to understand this element of value innovation, that they've thought about the element of how to create new value, and that they've thought about how to solve unique problems in unique ways.